the podcast about what fearing God looks like in the life of a Christian. Because King Solomon, the wisest man who's ever lived, said at the end of Ecclesiastes in Ecclesiastes 12:13 that the duty of man is to fear God and fear his commandments. That is the meaning of life. So I would like to unpack what kind of that means. What does that look like in the life of a Christian? That kind of thing. And today I have a friend of mine, Braden Sorbo, here to talk with me about what that means in the first episode of this podcast. Braden Sorbo is an internet personality. You're an actor. You're an author. So you're a very established person. But thanks for coming on, Braden. Thanks for giving your time.
Thank you for having me.
So, what does I I know the answer, but would you say that you are a God-fearing person?
I would like to think so. I mean, I hope that that I am by all counts. Yeah.
It's Jordan Peterson. Like, can we? It's impossible to fear God with all of our heart, but we do try every day, right?
That that is a pretty accurate assessment. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, fear not meaning, necessarily being scared of, but just more or less in awe of.
Right. The Hebrew word is that's most commonly used in the fear of God in the Bible is does literally translate to awe as well. So,
Yep.
where would you say that your fear of the Lord comes from? How did that become instilled in you, just
Oh
in your
shoot,
life?
man. Just throughout all of life. I mean, I've had ups and downs with my walk with God. I've walked away, I've walked back, I've walked away, I've fallen, like I've climbed and then went and started right back down at the bottom. And so through all of that, more or less in the past couple years, have had just these crazy revelations that have really instilled this sort of urgency where I've kind of been hit with life is finite. And I being God, like God said, he's like, life is finite. I'm infinite. You need to follow me. I was like, shoot. Okay, this is kind of a bigger deal than I was anticipating originally. I can't just necessarily live for whatever my flesh desires, whatever I want to gratify myself with, but rather need to just be in awe of, the creator of the universe. I mean, it's his universe that we're living in, right? So if I walked into your house and you were like, "Hey, don't put your feet up on the furniture," I'd respect your wishes. I wouldn't put my feet up on the furniture. I'm in God's universe. If he goes, "Hey, don't do these things," I should probably listen. It's his house.
Would you say that your parents are God-fearing individuals?
I would. Yeah, they definitely are. We both have different ways. I mean, growing up, we went to church a decent amount. We had a great church back in Thousand Oaks, California, where I was from. Here, we haven't necessarily found a home church that really we've clicked with, unfortunately. So we do a lot of online sermons, and I'm just sort of going around trying to find youth groups, maybe like young adult stuff that I could participate in. But I mean, it was definitely instilled. We did a lot of Bible reading just at breakfast, just a
Yeah.
chapter a day, not entire books at a time or something, but just one chapter a day while we're all eating, sort of just start our day off in the Word. And that definitely had a profound impact.
Would you say that them, reading the Bible with you and reading chapters, is that I don't want to say that circumstance determines how people become Christians or that kind of thing, but would you say that that played a big role in you becoming Christian, or is I mean, would you say that or not? Is that an assumption or what?
It's not an assumption. I would say to a certain extent, it certainly did, but at the end of the day, it really came down to the revelation that I had. It was just late at night, I mean, every day on or every birthday I had ever since I was 13, I would just sort of break down crying and just be like, God, why am I struggling with this? Why do I have these problems? What's going on here? Like, I don't understand. Take it from me, but I wouldn't fully lean on him. And so it wasn't until my, I want to say, 20th birthday that I really dove into what it means and just sort of gave it all. I mean, as much as I could. I would give it all as in all the temptations and things like that. The only part I struggled with was relationships. I mean, I was essentially telling God, "Hey, you can have every part of my life except like this one's mine. I got this covered. Don't worry about it. Like I got this part." And so it wasn't until the past year that I've really gone, "Okay, I'm stupid. That's not how that works. So you're either in or you're out 100% or not." And so it was at that point that I was like, all right, you can take it all. I'm not going to try to, force, like the perfect relationship. I'm not going to go looking for it. I'm not going to do these things. Like I'm just going to follow you and hope that, whichever daughter you have for me is ready, just like you're going to make me be, then that's how that'll work. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, so it's only been in the past year. I didn't know that actually. That you've when would you say that you like became a Christian then? Would you say?
I've been a Christian my whole life.
Okay.
There have been
Yeah.
times where I've, like I said, fallen away and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I've done these sins and I was sort of repentant, but then I would go do them again. It was like watching porn or any of those things where it's like, oh God, please forgive me. And then a week later I was right back on my computer and it's like that's not real repentance. That's not actually seeking forgiveness. That's not going to save you. And
Right.
so there would be moments like that where it's like, oh well, I'll just pray for forgiveness after, and that would be sort of like a get out of jail free card, except it's not a get out of jail free card. It's like when people say if you don't sin, then Jesus died for nothing, which
Ah,
really
yeah.
breaks my heart when people do that because obviously it's terrible. But yeah, it was the past 3 years because I'm 23 in like 2 weeks now, which is crazy to think about. But it was about 3 years ago
Oh,
that I really had that full revelation. I was like, all right, take it all. And then the past year, it's just increased. You know what I mean? Like when you
yeah.
start and people start and they're on fire for God, and then they start sort of burn out, they kind of fall away. It was like going to VBS or Bible camp or something, and you come home and you're like, raw, Jesus Christ. And then
Yeah.
a month later, you're just back to what you were doing because you're not really like for me, 3 years ago, that fire started and it was heavy hitting. And then in the past year, the coals have just been stoked. Like there's no burnout. In fact, there's more lumber added to the pile. Like it's just been this amazing uproar of just. And so I mean, the past 3 years have been the most developed moments of my life, I should say.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very cool that this happened for you. And then in the past few months, was it back in or January, you started your own BS with Braden Sorbo, right? Your own platform to talk about spiritual things and what you believe. So I would say you'd say probably that's included in that, right? Of that being on fire, is that kind of part of what led you to do that, or just
Yeah,
um,
I
just
mean,
you decided?
without a doubt, when I was younger, when I say younger, I mean like 16, 15, maybe up to 18, I wanted to be an actor in Hollywood. And I was going, man, I'll just suppress my views and I'll just wait a little bit. And then I'll become so famous that they can't cancel me. And then I'll be like, hey
Uh,
guys, you should love Jesus. And I was going, that's really dumb. Because what if I have the opportunity to preach to someone who might not be around in 7 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, now? And if I don't take that opportunity now, then I could be the reason, even if it's not specifically me, you know what I mean? But I would have partial blame, at least by feelings of guilt,
right.
that I didn't help this person at least hear about Jesus. And so I was like, all right, something needs to be done. And I noticed that there was a lack of masculinity in the world. People were just afraid to stand up for what was right, and what was right being, the grace of God. And so I realized that I needed to do something. I mean, obviously God facilitated that within me. He gave me this platform, this voice, this energy for him. And so I like to think of it as with social media. We were talking about this like a week ago at the Turning Point thing. You need to be egotistical, but for the kingdom. Like to be on social media, you have to have an ego. You have to want to succeed. You have to want to be good.
Right.
Parentheses for God, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
you have to be
Yeah, yeah.
zealous for the kingdom.
Right.
And so I've always just been on the social media thing, and I was kind of getting burned out with doing my own self-serving, like, oh, I'll make a funny video with my dad, or I'll do like a joke or whatever. And it was fun. Nothing was wrong with that. I mean, it wasn't anti-Christian content. I was always wearing my cross. I was still doing politically incorrect jokes, like stuff to stoke some sort of reaction from people. But I don't think I was necessarily honoring God in the sense that I wasn't opening the door for people to experience, something more than themselves. And so it really kind of clicked back in gosh, October, maybe November. No, even before that, August, like a year ago today, basically. So
Oh
I
wow.
met some people from His Glory, and they were like, "We would love to have a show with you." And so I created like 7 episodes and pitched them my show, and they went, "We're sold." And then I set a launch date of January 1st, and January 1st came and they fell away. It just didn't work. They were looking for something a little bit nicer. And my show is very upfront in your face. I mean, Jesus was 100% grace and 100% truth. Our goal as humans is to be 50% of each. However, 50% of each is by our standard perfection, and no one is perfect.
Right.
I've
Okay.
noticed I'm like 80 to 90% truth and 10 to 20% grace. I have trouble, you know, with that loving aspect, which is hard because to me, the truth is love.
Right.
Like if I'm doing something
Right.
wrong, I want someone to be straight up with me. I want them to say, "Hey, look, you're not honoring God with this, and this is something you really should look at. Here's some Bible verses that speak exactly to your situation. This isn't just me judging you. This is me showing in love truth." And that's what I do with my show.
Okay.
I talk about Galatians, what's it, 6, 7, where it says God will not be mocked. I mean, there are episodes where I reacted to a drag queen who dressed like Mother Mary pulled out baby Jesus from his uterus and started swinging him around by the umbilical
I
cord.
saw
I'm
that
like,
one. Yeah, I
yeah,
saw that one.
God is not mocked. He's not going to look at that and go, ha ha ha, that's so funny, guys. You're blatantly blaspheming him. That's unacceptable. He like,
Right.
but you need someone, or at least I see it as you need someone to point out that it's only Christianity that this happens. You know, just like with the Olympics, with the opening ceremony. Finally, the Vatican has called for a formal apology by the Olympics. They've said this is unacceptable. You
Oh,
need to speak out. Yeah, so good on them, you know, but there's there is a silence that is deafening in the church. And I figured if I can get a few extra people to start speaking up, a few extra people just to get more involved, then it's worth it. You know, I mean, you look at what's happened over the past year with foreign and, you know, inter-American affairs, and everything is just making me go, when are we getting that second coming? Because we could use, you know, Jesus as the lion this time, coming around, taking care of the problems. But then I realized, look, God had grace with me for, you know, 18, 23 years of my life. He still has grace with me. I still make mistakes. I'm by no means perfect. And so he has patience and grace with me. And if he didn't have that patience and grace with me, I wouldn't be here today. So I couldn't really, you know, go, hey, God, I think you're on the wrong schedule. Because what I learned reading Job was that there's nothing wrong with questioning God. Hey, God, what's this about? Like, well, I'm not quite sure I understand. There's something wrong with accusing God. Hey, I think you're doing something wrong. And so whenever I come to these things, you know, with the show or a podcast or discussions just in real life, just intermingling with people, it's always, all right, God, what do you want me to do here? Not let me do it and I'll talk to you after and tell you how I was right and you were wrong.
right. I enjoyed what you said in your Olympics video about
Thank you.
praying for those individuals because you kind of mentioned you have trouble you are all about truth and you have trouble with the kind of being more compassionate or loving aspect. I would
Yeah.
say that I sometimes could be maybe on the opposite end of that spectrum where I I stand for truth and I love the truth and I love to share the truth with people, but I don't sometimes want to be also harsh about it and stuff. So I would say I'm kind of more on the flip side of that.
Yeah.
And I can sometimes be the wrong ratio of those two, which I thought was very interesting that you just said. So you're very like a man of action, would you say, when it comes to this kind of the political stance in the Christians? So what kind of role do you think politics or our country and our politics, what role does that have in every Christian's life? Would you say do politics have a role in every Christian's life, and like how much does it have a role?
Christianity has a role in the life of politics, which means as a Christian, you need to be looking from a moral compass standpoint of God's law as opposed to human law, because human law is flawed. In the book of Daniel, the Medo-Persian Empire, right? Daniel was during the king Nebuchadnezzar, and he was ruling in Babylon's time, and then he all the way up into the Medo-Persian Empire with Darius. Now, the difference between Nebuchadnezzar and Darius was Darius and the Medo-Persian Empire, they tried to instill law. So whatever they wrote down, that was law. And you remember they went to Darius and they said, shouldn't it be great if everyone worshiped you as a god for 30 days? And Darius goes, that would be so great. You're right. Let me sign that law. And then they went, by the way, Daniel's praying to God, so you need to throw him in the lion's den. The law was established. The law couldn't be changed. Human law, right?
Right,
Daniel wasn't following the human law. He was following God's law.
right,
And so he was willing to put it all on display. Now, if you notice, Daniel he could have done a bunch of things. He could have gone into the closet to pray and just been like, no one's going to see me. He could have just killed himself because, you know, the lions were going to do it anyway. So who cares? And gone to God and be like, all right, I served my time. I'm coming to you, Jesus. Like, let's do this thing. He could have worn a flip jersey like on one side in front of everyone, be like, "Yay, King Darius," and then behind closed doors, been like, "All right, God, I'm with you wholeheartedly." But he doesn't. He goes up to the top floor of his room, he opens all the windows, and does it for everybody to see. And so, as Christians, we need to take a note of that because if your faith is private and not public, then you're doing the wrong thing and you are dishonoring God, right? And
right,
there's my truth part of it. Now, the grace part is there is grace and there is forgiveness, and God does understand that people have fear. The thing is, the fear of other people should not outweigh the fear of God.
right.
You should
Yeah.
not be so afraid of what somebody else is going to say, do, or think because of your relationship with Jesus. Pastor Mark Driscoll is one of my favorite pastors. He's out in Arizona, and this was actually his sermon last week or a week ago or something like that. And he talked about how when he was a newer pastor, he was younger, he was in his 30s or something. He he went to go do a whole, prayer over a sick man in a hospital. And as he was getting ready to leave, he felt the Holy Spirit say, "Bring your big Bible." Right? Not like just your little tiny thin book or whatever, but like the full size, big, thick Bible. He goes, "No, no, no. I walk into the room with a big Bible and everyone's gonna go, there's the preacher guy. What a weirdo. Like he's just carrying around his big Bible. You know what I mean?" And so
Yeah.
he told God, he goes, "Nope, I'm just gonna do the little Bible." And he felt the Holy Spirit say, "Nope, bring the big Bible." He said, "You know what? I'll bring both. How about that?" So he puts the Bibles both on the dashboard of his truck and he's driving. And the Holy Spirit keeps on pestering him, "Bring the big Bible, bring the big Bible." And he goes, "No, no, 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 no. I'm bringing the little one. I'm just going to put it in my pocket, go into the room, pray over the guy, and then leave." And eventually, after arguing with God for, 20 minutes or whatever, he walks into the hospital with the big Bible. Finally, he goes, "Whatever." So he takes the big Bible, he goes into the hospital, and he goes to the receptionist. He goes, "Hey, I'm here to see the man and pray over him." Blah, blah, blah. He turns around and there's this African lady, and her face goes white when she sees him. And she tells him, she goes, "You're a man of God. I was just asking for a sign." She goes, "I'm not a Christian, but I committed adultery on my husband. I think I'm pregnant with the other man's wife. I'm getting tested today. And if I'm pregnant, I was going to abort the baby. I told God to give me a sign." If he didn't walk in with the big Bible, if he had the little Bible in his pocket, she would have never seen him and that baby would have been aborted. There is a
Wow.
very good chance. And he told her, he goes, "Look, there's grace, there's forgiveness. You need to come clean to your husband. You need to remedy these things. And please don't kill the child. The child is innocent, did nothing wrong." Right? So it's like he gave grace, but without that big Bible, there wouldn't have been a sign. He lived his faith proudly on the outside, right? Not for his own pride, but for the pride or the honor and the glory of God. And so when it comes to speaking out, when it comes to, living a life as a Christian, there are plenty of people that I see. There's a girl I know online, and obviously I don't name names, I don't gossip, I don't do, these things, but there's a girl online whose entire brand is a bikini model. And the photos are very, very, very revealing. And in her bio, it says, "I'm a Christian." But nothing about her posts speaks to God and the love of God. Nothing about her post speaks to modesty and honoring traditional, femininity. And then she's in seminary school to become a pastor. And I go, nothing in the Bible says anything about the glory of women having spiritual headship over men, right? Not a matter of dominance, not a matter of one gender being better than the other, but a matter of order that God has instilled in the universe. And so you see people who, on an outward appearance, live in the world. And those people may profess Christian faith, they may profess the love of Christ inwardly, but we need those people to bring it outward. "By their fruits you will know them." And so if your fruits are sexual deviancy or lust or alcoholism or, degeneracy, gluttony, sloth, like if those are your fruits internally, here's the truth part, it doesn't matter what you say because you are not living a Christian lifestyle. You can't say, "Well, I'm right with God. You don't know my relationship with God." I do. By your fruits, I can see what your relationship with God is like. And
Right.
I tell you this not because I hate you, but because I love you. I want you to be saved.
I think actions speak louder than words. Definitely. I think us as Christians to profess the gospel, I think it entails a lot of just how we treat one another and how we treat, people who aren't Christians. Because there's a
Hmm.
space, the Christian space on social media, I think, gets like a bit, I don't know, icky sometimes. I think either
Everyone
there's,
does.
yeah, I think the internet is great for Christians to reach people, and I think that there's a lot of great obviously why I'm starting. I have a platform and try to talk about these things, and why you have a platform to talk about these things because it is a very great way to reach people. But there's only so much I can say without living in a way and presenting to other people on as much as I can in my life, not for other people, but just for myself, presenting to other people that I do live a life that is in submission to God. Right. That's
Hmm.
that's really the main goal. You talk a lot about masculinity and femininity, right? Those are big things to God's system. Do you think that God's system for both a nation and for an individual um, are being degraded um, in the modern day in a certain sense, or do you think that those values in God's design are being upheld, um, both in the government or in just the popular culture? What do you think the
Yeah.
scene is for
I
God's
think
design?
I think we all know that God's order and God's system are under attack, but the question more or less defaults to why. The blatant attack on the order that God has created is essentially in direct defiance because the people that are doing it are, satanic. That's why we had the opening ceremony attacking Christianity. The people that do that, that blaspheme God and blaspheme the Holy Spirit, are they hate God so much because they know he's real. I would say that they have stronger faith than a lot of Christians. Right?
Mhm.
They despise God so much that they're willing to do everything in their life against him and his will.
Right, right,
And so when it comes to the order of things, it's instilled in the fabric of the universe. Patriarchy means father rule from Latin. Patriarchy is what's going to happen. It's not a matter of will men lead, it's a matter of will good men lead. And so when you look at the world today, you don't see good men leading because good men lead according to God. Good men submit themselves to God and follow his rule. The
right,
men who are leading today are evil patriarchs, for lack of a better word. And there's a few different ways that those guys kind of reveal themselves. I mean, if you go back to Genesis, when God told Adam, subdue and fill the earth, Adam has the power to subdue, not the power to fill. Eve has the power to fill, not the power to subdue. That's the unison, that's the order part. That's where everything works for God's greater purpose. However, when you skip forward to say the Israelite Exodus in Egypt, right before they were freed from the Egyptians,
right.
Pharaoh during the time of Joseph was a good patriarch, even if he wasn't necessarily following God until Joseph came along. He became a good patriarch. He allowed the Israelites to rule. He gave them land. He gave them all these things. He said, "Please come, welcome your God's people. Like we would love your God, just as you come in and love Him." The Pharaoh after the time of Joseph saw them as a threat. And so the bad patriarch had three ways to do it. He had harness. I mean, he has men at his disposal, may as well turn them into slaves and use them for his own power,
Right.
right? He has turn complacent, which we have today. That's the most prominent one we have today, and I'll go back to it in a sec. Or three, destroy, which is what the Pharaoh tried to do. That's why he started to have all the Israelite kids killed if they were boys, right? So you have harness used for your own purpose. If you can't harness them, then you destroy them. Now, the second one I said was pacify, the most important one by any stretch, because pacify is a form of destruction, right? If you harness someone, they're going to know that they're being controlled, and eventually they're going to rebel, and that's what the Pharaoh feared in Exodus.
Right. Yeah.
If you destroy them, they can't rebel; they're destroyed. If you kill some, like it's dead. Person's not going to do anything if they don't have a heartbeat, right? So there's the evil one right away. But then again, you do that, and you're evil as well, and everyone knows it. However, if you pacify them, they're happy and you are happy.
Right.
And that's what we have today with pornography, with dating apps, with social media, with football, with basketball, with all of these games, all the bread and circuses. People are pacified. They don't feel the need to rule, to rebel. They don't feel the need to fight back or even check on what's going on because what's more important is just one turn away, one website search away, everything that they can want at the tip of their fingers. They don't need to worry about the people ruling because the people ruling give them access to this until they don't. But right now we're in the pacificity stage, and that is arguably the most dangerous because people don't even realize that they're being controlled. And by the time they do, we're in the gulag and it's a little bit too late.
So you mentioned entertainment as bread and circus to pacify men. You think pacificity is going on right now, which I would say, yeah, that's a very good observation. Your father, Kevin Sorbo, he's an actor. Are you are an actor, right? Concurrently, you
Mhm.
still are, right? Yeah, you're
Yes.
still in stuff.
Yeah.
Um, would you say that then entertainment, like how does entertainment play a role in the way that Christians can grab hold of the entertainment space and maybe get some kind of footing in spreading the gospel in that way? I think that would then be a powerful turn to say, as another avenue of because entertainment is so big in our modern culture. How would you say that that plays into how Christians can kind of take back the culture? Is entertainment, movies, TV, that kind of thing?
Yeah, people yearn for that entertainment. However, when they're pacified by it is when it controls them.
Right.
So that's the problem that we're seeing today. If we go back 60, 70 years in old Hollywood, Hollywood movies were very conservative. You had movies that inspired people to get out and do things, right? You had Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments, Cool Hand Luke. I mean, you had all these great movies from Westerns to classic piece of literature, Amadeus, the movie about Mozart, right? Like those were movies that inspired people. They left you feeling better than when you went in. And movies today are uninspiring. Movies today are almost depressing. You don't necessarily gain anything other than, oh, that made me feel good. Why did it make you feel good? What'd you like about it? I don't know. It was cool action, fun CGI. Like, there's nothing deeper than the surface level for a lot of content today. That's why you have, brain rot YouTube channels that just post, today I did 10,000, like it's just very surface level. Nothing is gained from these things, and they're just bright colors, flashy sounds, and big explosions to keep people's attention, and it works. The way that Christians capture it back is by creating our own content. I mean, you see that with Angel Studios making their movies, and a lot of smaller independent film festivals even, but film production companies are slowly getting more and more funding because it's something that people want to see. And so the culture war is won through media, but through media that inspires people to do more, not do less. And a lot of content today is encouraging people to do less with their lives because there's always something else to watch. You could sit on YouTube Shorts for 3 hours or TikTok for a couple hours just scrolling before you realize what time it is because it's so captivating that you get distracted.
Right.
Whereas you see a movie with a good moral message and a good cast, good film, good everything, and you finish that movie and you don't feel the need to watch anything else. You go, man, that was awesome. Time to go do something else with my day. People left old styles of content. People left those theaters feeling like they could be more than themselves. And when men were portrayed properly as godly masculine men or traditionally masculine men, people were inspired to act like that. That is why so many young boys, when they were growing up, wanted to be astronauts or cowboys or firefighters because those were the men of society. Those were the pioneers, the people, firefighters protected people. The astronauts were exploring space. The cowboys were saving the girls and, getting the bad guys put in jail or, all that stuff. Like people were inspired to do that. And now you have movies or TV shows where the dad is kind of just this useless, funny character that everyone makes fun of, and the mom is, a smoke show who's got her own thing, and she could get any guy she wants. You go, man, why'd she get with that loser? And maybe there's jokes about her cheating or leaving or something like that just aren't glorifying, and they leave you with this sense of not dread or despair, but just kind of this sense of being unfulfilled where you want something else. So you click something else and it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You said entertainment is how we win the culture war. Is that a stepping stone of our society? I mean, I know entertainment is a big part of my life every day, right? I
Mm.
guarantee it's a big part of yours and a lot of people's. So you think that's a stepping stone to winning the culture war, and
Yeah.
Christians should be participating in that by creating their own stories?
Yes.
So
Culture is downstream of media. And so when you have Christians who are supporting media that is degenerate or antithetical to the purpose that God has in their lives, they are actively participating in their own downfall. There's nothing wrong with watching a fun movie that's just there for explosions and, cool action scenes and you want to just relax after a long, busy day at work. There's something wrong with making it your entire life where that's you get off work and that's all you do. You don't have anything more than that. You know what I mean?
right,
Like
yeah,
if I were to go to a youth group tonight, or I could cancel the youth group and sit and watch a Disney movie, which one is going to have a more profound impact on my life?
right, yeah, totally.
Probably the youth group. You know what I mean?
Yep,
And so people would become so used to just sitting down doing nothing for so long that that is what their life has become. Hey, you want to go on a date? Just come over and watch Netflix. Let's go do something,
right.
right? And so culture is downstream of media.
So you and I are both Gen Zers, right? Gen Z is
I think
the up
so.
and coming generation. Yeah, I think you're Gen Z.
Probably.
Yes. You maybe don't. I don't associate with Gen Z, but
Yeah.
so we're the up and comers, right? I think Gen Alpha is the next one below us or whatever. I can't keep track of all the Gen names, but we're Gen Z. This is the next one. We're the ones becoming adults right now, dominating the culture. We're going out into the world. Just even on the internet, Cars 2 went from being a dumb, trashy kids movie to being one of the greatest movies ever made. Just because our generation has dominated the social media, so now all the comments are us who grew up on Cars 2 saying that we love it.
Hmm.
Just a random example. But
Yeah.
would you say that there is? Because I can kind of feel it. I would say that there is a yearning for, since the culture war has shifted to maybe pacifying or that kind of thing, the stuff you were saying. I would say that there is a yearning for um, you know real stuff, the gospel, God's way, God's design, God's plan, a life that fears God. I would say that God, the idea of God in some way, in some sort, is almost kind of a trend on, at least from
Yeah.
people my age that I see whether or not it's the idea of God. The Bible, Yahweh, at least people are looking for, something outside of themselves, I think. So would you say that there's even the possibility of chance that we are on the verge of a revival of some sort, or do you agree with that, or do you think that that's something that's happening in the culture, or do you even know, or what did you say?
This, yes, Generation Z is by far and large the most conservative Christian generation we've had in a millennia. I
Right,
mean, there is a revival going on because a lot of guys our age are looking at everything happening in the media and going, I'm not a bad guy. What? I didn't do anything wrong, and people already hate me for no reason. This is weird. So they're
right,
completely turning away from that. Now, ironically, everyone talks about teenagers and kids rebelling and all that stuff. And it was funny because back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, rebelling was saying no to the man and flipping off the system and being like punk rock and all that stuff.
right,
And now all the punk rockers are in favor of the system. So rebelling is actually going against the system in the sense of following God because God is no longer part of the system. They've removed him.
right,
And so you have this kind of revival almost of young men, especially who are devoting their lives to Christ at an earlier stage. Because a big problem that we see and a big problem that I have with a lot of the social media content that I react to is a lot of the girls and guys who are part of the whole clubbing and that culture, they find God not too late, but they find God later in life.
right,
And at that point, a lot of damage has been done. And I like to say nobody is beyond God's grace. People are beyond humans' grace because as humans, we are flawed and we will struggle to give grace in areas that God would not if they just simply asked,
right,
because no one's perfect.
right,
Yeah, I'd say no one's beyond God's forgiveness. And I obviously I give forgiveness, but the theme is no one's beyond, or people can be beyond my forgiveness. Obviously, grace being the proper word there.
right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because those who seek repentance and forgiveness genuinely deserve it. And so the problem with the older generations, millennials and things like that, is they're all in their 30s now, and a lot of them are deciding to find God because the way that they've been doing their own life hasn't worked out for them. And my heart breaks for those people because maybe they didn't have the experience, they didn't have the opportunity to learn about God until later in life, and they just lived for the gratification of their own flesh. The problem is, in doing so, they have almost condemned themselves to a certain set to live by for the rest of their lives. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be used for good. Saint Mary of Egypt, I'm not even Catholic, but I know a little bit of the saints. Saint Mary of Egypt was a prostitute when she from the age of 13 all the way to 30 years old, I believe. For 17 years she was a prostitute.
Wow.
And she went to a temple in the Jordan, or a church in the Jordan, to go see a piece of the Eucharist or something, and there was a physical force that barred her from walking into the church. So she went out to the graveyard and just sat in front of a statue of Mary and just started crying. And she prayed to God. She asked for forgiveness for God. She said, I will change my life. I'll repent of my ways and I won't do, what I mean? Like, I'll become a nun. I'll become pure for you. And you send me and I'll go. And she walked into the church. She had another breakdown in front of the cross. And she ended up going out to the desert and lived in the desert as a nun for 40 years. And so the moral of that story is essentially people can have a past, whether it be sexual, whether it be, whatever it is. But forgiveness doesn't look the same for us as it does for God. So forgiveness for Mary was great, you're forgiven, now you must become pure, you will not be married. You know what I mean? Like, you won't have a husband. That's just how it is. You've been forgiven. It is your turn now to lead other women away from the life that you once led, right? You have that forgiveness, you have that grace. Now please go and do something phenomenal with it for the kingdom. And so people can have all of these problems, people can have all these things. Their outcome, their forgiveness journey might not look like what they expect it to look like. You know what I mean? And so when it comes to this revival, it's really amazing to see younger people getting into what it means to be Christian at a younger age so that they might not necessarily have those same struggles.
I mean, there's also talk of Gen Z being the most like depressed or anxious or whatever generation of us
Also
all.
true, a quarter of Generation Zers, mostly young women, identify with the LGBTQ narrative in some way, shape, or form, bisexual, queer, trans, whatever it is. So there is the way the oh, man, the biggest problem that I've seen today is men and women are different, right? Men are logical creatures, women are creatures of emotion. Those are both good things in their own respective aspects, right? I'm a logical person. There's the truth part. Women have more empathy, which means more women are going to be more graceful, right? Like guys can also have empathy, guys can also have truth. Like there's with some women are super truthful without any grace, some like so it goes and it fits, but by and large, a lot of women are more emotional and empathetic thinkers. And
Yeah.
so the problem with that is it leads to bad men taking advantage of them. And obviously, I don't even need to say why that's wrong, but it breaks my heart to a sense to see that these young girls are being manipulated online, manipulated by the culture and just destroyed by this ideological warfare that's going on to where they conform to this terrible thing, right? I mean, pride is a sin. It's to me arguably the worst of the seven sins because you can be proud of all the other six, right? Your pride goes before the fall.
Right.
And so when it comes to Generation Z being depressed. We account that to screen time as well. People who spend 6, 7, 8 hours a day on their phones end up being more depressed than those who don't,
Right.
right? Statistically, a lot of young girls spend more time on their phones than guys do. That's just not healthy. Statistically, women are by and large on far more antidepressants and medical drugs than men are. I believe there was something like 70% of women by the time they're 35, 40 years old will be taking at least one sort of pharmaceutical drug.
Wow.
That's not healthy. That's not good for you. And the problem is these young women have been manipulated by the system into believing that it is. And that breaks my heart because that is dangerous. That is disastrous. It's not even dangerous. We're seeing the real-time effects that it's having right now. And so when you talk about Gen Z, I specifically mean young men because young women are being told to hate men. And so these guys aren't getting dates. They're not going out. They're not being like they grew up watching these movies where you go to prom and there's a big party and maybe you have sex. And obviously none of that is good, but they have this idea, this conception of what life is like as a teenage guy. And then they go out and the world is completely the opposite than what they see. So they turn away from all of it. They just decide, you know what, none of it's worth it. I'm just gonna back off respectfully. And that's what we need more of in society.
Okay, so I would also like to mention you mentioned I said Gen Z is depressed, right? And the first thing you said was one fourth of women identify with the LGBTQ party. So party orientation.
Community, and there's a very
Community.
good correlation. There is a statistical correlation that links those types of depression to identification with that community.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to
Yes.
ask that. Is there? Yeah, there's a correlation, which I know that there's a correlation between.
So 25% of Gen Z being depressed, a vast majority of young women identifying as part of the LGBTQ community, and then a majority of the LGBTQ community identifying with some sort of anxiety, ADHD, depression, bipolar disorder, whatever it is. All of it just just falls in line perfectly because it's anti-ethical to the plan that God has for us, and therefore because it goes against Him, it hurts us.
Right. So I agree with that. So there's this, animosity. I think on like everywhere I see between women and men. There's the war between the sexes, which is I see all the time. Any video about girls saying, "Oh, men do this, that's awful," and videos about dudes saying girls do this, that's awful. That's a big thing. There's the LGBTQ issue. There's the abortion issue. There's all this stuff. Depression, social media, an image of what you see online. Being presented as better than it is in actual life, but making you think by comparison that you're worse, that kind of thing, which is true for both boys and girls, right? But what would you say then is the cure? Then what do us as Christians do? Part I would say before you answer, a part of that is what we're doing right here, which is we're trying to meet people where they are. People who spend 6, 7 hours a day on their phone. We're gonna cut this up into clips and stuff and post them on Instagram or whatever. So we'll
Mhm.
meet them right where they are with this conversation, right? Which is a conversation about spiritual things and God and fearing God and what that looks like, and how the Christian walk is much better than anything else, any other way of living ever, right? So I would say that's part of the battle is meeting people where they are, which is what we're going to try to do, and what you do with BS with Braden Sorbo. When people are scrolling on their phones and comparing themselves to others, to see, have that broken up by a conversation about the spirit and the soul and God, I think that's a powerful thing. But what would you say is, you know, just on a macro level for a nation, for a country, or just what Christians can do in their steps every day? What is the answer? What is the cure for us that we can put out into the world to help, with this madness, the system, the broken system that's infected everyone's lives?
Yeah, I'll conclude with this then. That's
Yeah.
the optimal cure
Right.
is
Right. Right.
repealing the 19th Amendment. That's the optimal cure. Instilling a one vote per household system, households owned where Americans own land, the husband, the spiritual leader, and the leader of the household institutes the vote for the family as a whole, on top of bringing people back to Christ in the spiritual order that he has ordained for us, right? Jesus is not worse than Christ, or Jesus is not worse than God. However, in the Godhead, God is the head and Jesus submits himself to the will of the Father. The wife is not worse than the husband. However, for complete order in creation, the wife submits herself to the will of the husband, just as Christ submits to Jesus, Jesus submits to God. It's all about, it's all about order. That's it. From a logical standpoint, it is all about order. And so the emotion, the empathy, and the grace that women have is a beautiful thing. However, when bad men get in power, they misuse and mistreat it. You have today young women who are willing to vote for a politician who's going to destroy the country simply because she said that she will allow them to be sexual degenerates who will kill their babies. That's it. It doesn't matter whatever this girl says. The US just hit $35 trillion in national debt. We have sent $175 billion dollars to Ukraine in the past 2 years. We have sent $150 billion dollars, spent that much, on the border crisis that's happening and the migrants who are invading America. And these girls won't look at that. Instead, they will look at, will this politician let me murder the child in my womb? And they will vote accordingly. That is the problem. So it starts with women, and the women start with proper leadership because right now they are being misled and mistreated by men who would simply like to abuse and use them for their own sexual personal gain. And that right there is terrible because that is dishonoring God's daughters. Whether they know it or not, whether they accept God or not, they are still his daughters. Whether they're down for it or not, they're still his daughters. And men who are weak and cowardly want to take advantage of them, which is what we're seeing today.
So the cure you'd say is then is the system, the governmental system, Christians taking a charge in fixing that in some way. Is that what you're
The
saying, or
system needs to return to Christ, and
system needs
that's
to
only going
return
to
to
happen
Christ?
with Christians. Non-Christians aren't going to do that. Christians need to stand up. Like I said, you'll know them by their fruit. And so, if you as a Christian are sitting back at home and you're not even going to vote in this election, I'm going to say you're not a Christian. Get out there and do something.
Do you think the system will return to Christ then, if godly men, get out and take action like you're saying? Do you think that there's a point where it will return, or do you think that's a possibility?
We're at the turning point of every single nation ever falling. Like this right now, historically speaking, every nation that has achieved this point where we are at right now in terms of success and sexual degeneracy, among other things, has not come back. So I am not optimistic, but I know God works miracles, and I want to say that He can and will work a miracle if enough people are are fighting for Him. I
Right.
mean, He promised He wouldn't flood the earth again, and I'm going, man, you want to like do a one-off, revoke that really quick, give us another rainbow or something, because we're far worse than Noah's time. We're far worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, like all these things. And so I'm optimistic in the sense that he'll work a miracle, but I also know that God's permissible and perfect will are two different things. His perfect will is perfect. That's all the good that can happen. His permissible will is all the bad that he allows to happen simply because he does not wish to infringe on the free will of humans.
Yeah, I think that there's a purpose in where our nation's at right now because, like we were saying, we're on the verge of a revival. I think part of the depression and part of all of the heartbreak that's in the world, how broken our society is, because the government's always broken, right? I mean, it's God puts these people in power, but I mean, they're still people, and God allows them to do what they want, right? And it's
Mhm.
all part of God's plan somehow. But I think that this is all part of, I think the revival is happening because we can see people our age can see the system's broken. We can see that these people in power who aren't fearing God, who aren't living by what the Bible says, aren't doing too well, and this society isn't doing too well. And we can see the clear contrast of, well, if this is bad, then what is good? And what is good is the Bible, right? So I think that
Yep.
there is a purpose in place. If the Democratic Party, which you would say is, and I would say too, is the opposite of God's plan and God's purpose and God's will, if they win the election, that's could be God's plan, then that will be God's plan, and God has a purpose for that. But you would say that we shouldn't get to that point, right?
Certainly hope not.
Certainly hope not, right? So you think that Christians need to take charge, go out into the world, be in the world, not of the world, and take action and turn over the ballots and make an election that's too big to rig. That's to do our best to make a system that's more in line with God's word. You would say that is the cure for just anything that's wrong with our world today.
There's nothing else we can do. Now, shy of revolution.
I think that's a good note to end on. I don't
Yeah,
say so.
perfect.
Yeah, I know you have to go. So, thank you so much for coming on, Braden. I gotta say I'm pleased with how we met. First of all, because we've known each other for like a few months now. I don't know how long,
Hmm.
but I'm pleased with how I met you because I didn't meet you as you know first of all, Kevin Sorbo's son. I also didn't meet you as Braden Sorbo, internet personality. I met you as some guy who showed up at my Bible study or came to my church,
Yeah,
and towered over every other person on Sunday because I don't know if anyone here's seen Braden in person, but he's what 6'5",
give or
wall
take.
wall of muscle and pure human accessibility. Because I have a hard time talking about discipline ever with someone like you as well because I don't have six packs, so I don't know, but that's yeah. So I would say I'm pleased on how I met you, how I know you, how I came in contact with you. Because also I know your brother as well.
Yep.
But I'm glad I didn't meet you, as something I'd heard about you or a persona.
Yeah.
I met you as you, so I'm grateful for that. I will
Thank
say.
you.
But I'm grateful that you decided to take your time to come on today and talk about some things. Get some of these topics out and your thoughts on them. I appreciate hearing your thoughts and hearing you talk about stuff. I love your show, BS with Braden Sorbo. So go check out Braden stuff if you haven't. You're probably coming from that because I'm leeching off of your influence, Braden. But yeah, go check out Braden stuff. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for giving your time. Thank you so much for listening, everybody out there. And I'll see you guys on my next episode, which will be some other time. I don't know soon, but thank you so much, Braden.
Thank
We'll see
you.
you guys in the next one.
Peace.